Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie and television discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by Sean Koufax.
Brandon Fraser fat.
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and I sure do love a flatulent donkey.
Oh, let me tell you, I did not know a lot about this week's episode, but man, this week's review and everything. But when I found out that it had donkeys in it, I was just like, oh, so we already know what Bruce's score is going to be. Unbelievable. Who would have wrote this in their books? I sure shooting wouldn't.
And I gotta add the big green puff of gas when he toots. That shines up the shoe in my book.
No kidding, man. I'm just like, this has Leslie written all over it. It's just like they jumped into your dream journal and just pulled all the good stuff out.
I just wish I knew how they trained the donkey to do that, because I want one.
Why do they keep taking all of your ideas, Bruce?
I tell you, man, it's some Inception sort of stuff. They're going in and raking out what they can and putting it on the screen, boy. So we're going to be talking about the first two episodes of the Doom Patrol that's on the DC streaming app and everything, and you can go check that out right now. But before we do that, let's get into it, boys. Well, first of all, I do want to say this. Thank you to everyone that supports this here program over at patreon.com/HMP. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we do happen to have a letter from one of those executive producers right here. Let me go ahead and play this little tune.
Bale's here.
Ah, it's so lovely. Bruce, let's start with you.
Yes, this one comes from Alex Caudill, executive producer Alex Caudill. And he's one of my favorite. You know, all the executive producers are my favorites, but I think he has some ties to the same part of the country where I grew up. I think he told me once he had some ties to Owsley County, Kentucky, which is like, I don't know, maybe 30 miles from where I grew up. And guess what the mascot is of Owsley County High School?
Badger.
The Owls. They're the Owsley County Owls. The name's right there, man. It works
Oh,
perfect.
my gosh.
Is it a Native American? Oh, you've already told us. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, it's the Owl tribe. You've heard of the Crow Indians, right?
I haven't. I don't know anything about Indians.
Have you heard about the almost every bird, like the cardinals? Those are Native American folks.
I don't
too.
even watch I don't even watch Major League.
Oh man,
I'm staying away from all Indian references, no matter what.
There was
Screw
a
you,
great
Major
skit
League.
in the '90s. A great skit in the '90s where on SNL they had a Native American individual who was protesting Cleveland's baseball's mascot, and somebody mentioned Atlanta. He's like, "No, the Braves are awesome. I love Dale Murphy," or something like that. But no, we got to change Cleveland. It was funny at the time. Probably couldn't get put on the air now. Anyway, hey guys, none of this reflects the opinion of executive producer Alex Caudill, by the way. This letter does, however, express his opinion. Hey guys, as an executive producer, I feel it's my job to point out your errors. First, you misspell my name every episode. It is Caudill, not Caudy. Apparently, you leave the last two L's off. Second,
first of all, let me pause right there. That's probably just a cut and paste mistake that I made once and just continued to make. So yes, I will fix all of that.
Guilty of the same here. Second, and this one's important. This is egregious, guys. Alex was never given a nickname.
Ooh.
Oh my.
So do we want to put the brakes on and remedy that right now before we go on?
Please.
Yes.
Sean, have at it. You're the nickname giver.
Brass Knuckles.
Brass Knuckles. That's a good one.
Man, and I was going to call him Owl. That's way better than mine. Okay, third, Sabrina was a good show. He wanted to point that out.
No, you're wrong.
Now
Incorrect.
Another good point. His fourth point, not enough references to obscure 80s pop culture. How about Bruce?
No, I know that's an out-and-out lie.
How about Bruce starting a segment? Oh, I'm loving this guy, man. I'm loving this guy. How about Bruce starting a segment relating each movie to Charlotte Rae or Mr. T? Why not both, Alex? Why not both is what I say. I think we could do that. We could have like a little bit called 80 Minutes of 80s where we do the show. Then at the end, I can talk for about 80 minutes of each episode.
Sean and I just leave the room and leave the recorder on and just be like, we'll come back after we go do shopping or whatever.
Oh, man. Yeah, I like that. Bruce in the big 80s. We could call it that. New Sean is much more entertaining than old Sean. I agree with that 100%.
So do I.
What's the next big change for the show? Replacing Bruce with new Bruce, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, or new Adam who actually puts out Film Find episodes?
That hits home.
Love the show, and I will continue to donate at the executive producer level. Thanks for all the laughs over the years. Alex Caudill, not Caudy.
Thanks, Brass Knuckles.
You know what a great nickname would have been? Caudal fin, like on a shark. They have caudal fins.
No one needs that. Brass Knuckles works. Stop trying to
Brass Knuckles.
Stop trying to hurt the system here. We know what it is. Brass Knuckles is way more easy to remember, and it makes you sound like a BA.
Caudy Murphy would have been good.
Now I will say this, Alex. Over the next probably 2 or 3 days here, I'm having. I don't want to call it a meeting because that makes it sound like it's way more important than it is. But I have an idea for the Film Find that's coming up that it may involve some very interesting stuff. Stay tuned. Don't worry.
Are any of those interesting items like a guy who can play the spoons?
Listen, I'm already on the show. All right.
I'd like to think that there is going to be a meeting with like muffins and like coffee, and there's a long table involved.
It's more like a bar and beer. That's pretty much what it's going to end up being. But
I like the idea that Adam with a notebook and a ballpoint pen is what he calls a meeting.
I've called this meeting to order by myself.
If I know Adam enough, there is no pad of paper and ballpoint pen. There's Adam going, no, I'll remember all this,
and never does. Hey, I don't want to say if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, because it is a little broke. But nevertheless, sometimes you can't go back. We have actually a voicemail here from longtime listener and supporter on Patreon. You see the theme here? You see the people who really care, the people that love the show the most are supporters on Patreon. I'm just saying it ain't no coincidence. But let's go ahead and listen to Krista's voicemail. Let me make sure I got the volume turned up. Here we go.
Hey, Adam, Bruce, and Sean. This is Krista from Unspoiled. To the 5 people on the planet who haven't seen Captain Marvel yet, skip forward a few minutes until you hear a dude's voice again. Pretty sure Sean and I don't sound that much alike.
It's close.
First, Bruce. Thank you. You're a hero for your continued work to give those of us who are not as well versed in comics, because who is, that we can fully address folks who pretend that Stan Lee and Marvel Comics weren't just for straight white men. If it's okay with you, I'd really like to take your comic book connection out of the episode to share with folks who might not normally listen to the show. Now I want to say why this movie was just as important for women as for girls and boys. The script wasn't perfect, but I think the opening scenes with Carol and Jan-Rog maybe wasn't as easy for 3 men to relate to. I was in electrical engineering in school, and out of every 10 students, only 1 of us was a woman. Sometimes the open sexism was infuriating, but benevolent sexism is much harder to shake. Jan-Rog telegraphed that he wasn't a good guy because of how he acted toward Carol in the opening scenes. Rather than letting Carol work with her powers that she would need in the field, Jan-Rog had her practice without them even though she would need them during missions. What was the point but to shake her confidence? Telling Carol that she couldn't use her strengths that he didn't possess and downplaying them was all too familiar. It was every man who discouraged me from focusing on my abilities to explain and synthesize technical information into English. Numerous men told me writing wasn't really a valuable part of engineering, and I think they honestly believe that. But that skill helps me every day as a patent attorney. Further, the constant reprimands of don't be emotional so that she fits in his view of what she should be was another sign that he expected her to stop using her strength, another familiar experience. But as we saw, emotions and humor fueled her abilities as much as her confidence. Those scenes made me invested in Carol right away. I also felt more of a connection to Carol because she has multiple flaws before she gets powered up. She's not the best airman. Still the name for women in the Air Force.
Oh, I'm sorry, the stupid iPad plopped out here.
Today. She's not the best at driving a go-kart. She can't beat a man bigger and more practiced than her who taught her all of her fighting skills in hand-to-hand combat. She's not a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, a kid from the Bronx who has the purest heart of all, a PhD scientist 7 times over, a prince, a god, or even a demigod of Amazon descent. But what she shows to everyone who sees this movie is that a woman shouldn't have to be twice as good as the best guy to deserve a seat at the table. So while I agree Captain Marvel is great for kids to see, it's also incredible for women because it shows having our strengths devalued is a common experience. It provides us with a helping hand to get back up off the ground the next time we have to cope with another person telling us we're not good enough. And Sean, I'm gonna guess that I've been more annoyed about Marvel not having female-led movies than you. But since we finally get that film, I'd be even more pissed if there weren't any nods to what it was like to be a woman back in the 90s. If you remember, there were complaints about the promos for the movie because they didn't have Larson smiling enough. Larson responded to a question about the biker scene being related to the promo complaints. Her response was perfect. That's just a depiction of the female experience. I've seen this movie 4 times already. I just wanted to add a few things that I think you all, and particularly Bruce, will appreciate. Kelly Sue DeConnick got her own cameo. She gave Carol quite the look at the rail station when Carol got off the train. Maria Rambeau's call sign on her plane was Photon. Was it just me, or did Pegasus feel like a nod to the Valkyries? You all don't know what's happening with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so Coulson being in the movie was doubly awesome to those of us who got past the first half of the first season. There's also more Kree in that show. Last thoughts. Fury's wig and Maria Rambeau's hair did the actors no justice. But given Hollywood makes most black actors do their own hair, I guess it's not too surprising. Adam, I agree with you about Larson's running being a little jarring, but what bugged me more was seeing her toenail polish. Do the Kree get pedicures? The chain of custody for the Tesseract. Lawson had the tech to find the Tesseract so she could use it in her research. Last, you all shipping Carol and Maria was adorable. As a woman who can find any gender attractive, it seemed a little more one-sided to me on Carol's side. I also liked a woman-centered movie that doesn't have any love interests. I'm still shipping Valkyrie and Natasha, though. Thanks for all you guys do. The Lil Impaler, sticking it to the man.
Lil Impaler. See, she remembered her nickname.
Yeah, feel free to use that clip anywhere. And if people don't like it, have them send you the emails, please.
Indeed. Listen, listen, Bruce, you're the most comic book versed of all of us. How much do the Krees enjoy the pedicures?
What people don't understand is that in the native tongue, Kree means pedicure. Like in their home language on their home planet, they have named themselves after well pedicured toenails.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they all saw Boomerang. Do you remember how nice Eddie Murphy's toenails looked in Boomerang?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so that was kind of the central premise of their culture after that movie came out. Eddie Murphy's feet.
You know, if I had that NBC The More You Know theme, I'd play it right now. Because, man, oh, man, I learned something brand new on this show every single week. And there's no better reason to donate now at patreon.com/HMP. Boy, I write that one all together there, doesn't it?
Krista, if you don't, if you're interested, there's only 2 issues out so far, so you're not very far behind if you're not reading it already. But DC has been bringing back some of Jack Kirby's Fourth World characters lately, and they have a series called Female Furies with Granny Goodness and Big Barda and the like in that story. And it really tackles, at least in the first issue, the idea that in order to be female soldiers, they have to outperform the men to even be considered minimally competent. They have to be like better than every man they put up against them. I think you might enjoy that series. Only 2 issues in so far. You can get caught up pretty quickly on Comixology. Granny Goodness and Barda. Like that. It's a shock that you picked up that book, Bruce. Just an utter shock. It features a young Granny Goodness being pressured to sleep her way to the top. And that is the same one. Was it Ed Asner that does the voice of Granny Goodness on the cartoons? It's just great. Yeah, we thank Krista and Alex for their emails there, and so we'll wrap it on up with this. Come on.
Bale's here.
And, of course, as always, if you have any emails, send them on our way at heromoviepodcast@gmail.com. Well, boys, let's get into it. Here is the trailer for the Doom Patrol.
This is the story of 5 fearless superheroes.
Justice League 2020!
More TV superheroes, just what the world needs. Ugh.
Do you have a photo printer in there somewhere?
No.
Is it your butt? I bet it's his butt.
Are we really the best people to hunt a supervillain?
Hell no.
Alrighty, that was the trailer for Doom Patrol, our new release review this week. Here is the IMDb plotline. As we know, IMDb always 100% correct in everything they say and or do. The adventures of an idealistic mad scientist and his field team of superpowered outcasts. This is starring Brendan Fraser, Timothy Dalton, Matt Brummer, Alan Tudyk, April Browlby, I think. Okay. Danielle Guerrero, and more. Bruce, I don't know that all of us know about this here Doom Patrol, but let's get down to it, shall we? Come on, you jerk. Open up. This is my life. There it is. Golly bum. Can you tell I haven't got my computer fixed yet?
Oh, you don't say.
No kidding.
Well, the Doom Patrol first appeared in a comic called My Greatest Adventure in June 1963. And I always feel necessary to point out that the Doom Patrol predates the X-Men. Now, why do I feel the need to do that, you may ask? Well, it's because some people theorize that the Doom Patrol heavily influenced the original incarnation of the X-Men, as it was not an uncommon practice for the two companies to mimic one another back in the Silver Age. Let's get the similarities out of the way now so we can move on with our discussion. The Doom Patrol are led by an old jerk in a wheelchair. The Doom Patrol are shunned by society. The Doom Patrol's tagline was the world's strangest heroes, while the X-Men original tagline was the strangest superheroes of all. The Doom Patrol fought a group called the Brotherhood of Evil, whereas the X-Men fought against the Brotherhood of Evil mutants. Those similarities, though, are superficial and really only similar in the early days, as both properties took on lives of their own and became allegories for different issues, I suppose. Now, the original Doom Patrol lineup consisted of the Chief, Robot Man, Elastigirl, and Negative Man. Other characters would come and go, but this four always made a solid core for the team. The Chief, Niles Calder, is a paraplegic with genius-level intellect. He's the founder and organizer of the team in order to protect the innocent and fight crime, and to teach humanity to accept others who live as ostracized freaks, those who have been radically transformed from terrible accidents. The Chief lost the use of his legs in a convoluted plot that involved General Immortus and a chemical to prolong human life and an explosive planted in Calder's torso. Now, Robot Man, also known as Cliff Steele, is the only member to appear as part of every single incarnation of the Doom Patrol. Initially, his name was Automaton, but that was just silly, so they changed it to Robot Man. And how on earth were there not already at least 100 Robot Mans by 1963? That's like the awesomest name ever to a 9-year-old.
How many Robot Mans were there?
There were not nearly enough, I'll tell you that. One is like 99 short of a baker's dozen or something. But Cliff Steele was a race car driver that suffered a serious accident in the Indianapolis 500. Yep, that's right, in the Indy 500, which is, of course, Gomer Pyle's favorite sporting event. Now, though his body was destroyed, Niles placed his brain in a clunky metal body. After the operation, Cliff suffered from frequent depression because he viewed himself as less than human. In 1977, it was revealed that Will Magnus, the creator of the Metal Men, had actually built Robot Man's body, thus making him a half-sibling to the Metal Men. By the way, how long do you think until the DC streaming app makes a live-action Metal Men show, and do you think that'll be an origin story?
6 months.
Anyway, it can't happen too soon if you ask me. Now, in the 1980s, post-crisis, another revelation occurred. It was revealed that Niles Calder had caused the accident that destroyed Cliff Steele's body. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Elastigirl, also sometimes called Elastowoman, is Rita Farr, an Olympic swimming gold medalist turned Hollywood actress. She's like the female Johnny Weissmuller, you could say. You know, Tarzan, all the kids love Tarzan.
Especially the Johnny Weissmuller version.
Rita is exposed to unusual volcanic gases while shooting a film in Africa. When Farr recovers, she discovers that she can expand or shrink her body at will, from hundreds of feet tall to mere inches in height. When she gains greater control of her powers, she discovers that she can enlarge one limb at a time. Yep, totally unlike Elastigirl and The Incredibles. How they got away with that, I'll never know. Heaven help the company that tries to tread all over Disney's intellectual property in that fashion. I mean, Disney made Howard the Duck put pants on, for Christ's sake. And they totally just use the character Elastigirl with reckless abandon. Well, Rita Farr would go on to become the adopted mother of Garfield Logan, a person some may know better as Beast Boy. Also, in continuity, Rita Farr is friends with Sigourney Weaver, so that goes a long way in my book. Now, Negative Man is the code name of Larry Trainor. Trainor's career as a superhero begins when he's accidentally exposed to a radioactive field in the atmosphere while piloting a test plane. This experience leaves him radioactive, but also gives him a strange superpower, the ability to release a negatively charged energy being from his body. The being, also referred to as Negative Man, or later as the Negative Spirit, can fly at high speed, cause solid objects to explode, and pass through solid materials. In the comics, it's drawn to resemble a shadowy silhouette of a human being surrounded by a bright glow. And this being in the comics is under Trainor's control and appears, at least at first, to have no mind of its own. Unfortunately, Trainor is left weak and defenseless while the being is separated from his body, and he can only risk sending it out for 60 seconds at a time without risking death. Trainor resembles the Invisible Man. He's forced to wear specially treated bandages over his entire body to protect bystanders from his own radioactivity. In 1977, the Negative Spirit inhabited a female Russian cosmonaut, and we had a Negative Woman for a while. After a bit, the Negative Spirit goes back to Trainor, and when Grant Morrison wrote the team, Negative Man became Rebus, a divine intersex person who, again, must wear bandages. Negative Man appears in the two-part Teen Titans episode, not to be confused with Teen Titans Go, but the original animated Teen Titans episode called Homecoming, where he was voiced by Judge Reinhold, just in case you're curious. Now, the Doom Patrol didn't find great commercial success, and in 1968, the title was canceled. After a 9-year hiatus, the team was brought back into action in 1977 by writer Paul Cooperberg, who would go on to write the series for 11 years. Then, what was probably the biggest thing ever to happen to the Doom Patrol, at least from a publishing perspective, happened. In 1988, Grant Morrison found time to write the Doom Patrol. In an introduction to the Omnibus collection of the Doom Patrol, Grant Morrison said, "I wanted to reconnect with the fundamental, radical concept of the book, that here was a team composed of handicapped people. This was a group of people with serious physical problems and perhaps too many bats in the belfry," end quote. Now, speaking of too many bats in the belfry, Grant Morrison introduced a new character, one called Crazy Jane. Jane Morris is the dominant alternate personality of Kay Chalice, who suffers from dissociative identity disorder. As a result of exposure to the alien dominator's gene bomb, if you ever read that storyline or watched the special crossover episode on the CW a few years back, each of her 64 alternate personalities was given a different superpower. Kay Chalice was abused by her father in the worst way imaginable, beginning when she was 5 years old, and this led to her dissociative characteristics. Here are some examples of her personalities and powers. Baby Doll is a childlike personality that believes everything is lovely. Black Anus is an aggressive misandrist equipped with sharp claws, red eyes, and blue skin. Daddy is an impression of Jane's father, and he's a giant monster made of insects, poop, and puzzle pieces. Flaming Katie is a fire being that can control fire. Hammerhead is very aggressive towards everyone and has super strength. Lucy Fugue has radioactive bones and transparent skin. Mama Pentecost is an expert puzzle solver. Penny Farthing speaks with a stutter. The Scarlet Harlot is a nymphomaniac with the power to create ectoplasm projections and absorb stray psychosexual energy, and so on and so on. Near the end of the Grant Morrison run of Doom Patrol, Jane makes a pilgrimage back to her childhood home, facing her own traumas and overcoming them. This brings peace to her inner turmoil, and her personalities integrate into facets of a more normal, if complex, single personality. Morrison also introduced Danny the Street, who is a sentient road, and an old character that Morrison breathed new insanity into is Mr. Nobody. Eric Morden only appeared in one issue of the original run of Doom Patrol. He's a forgettable member of the Brotherhood of Evil who steals a moon robot from the chief. When Grant Morrison reintroduced Morden in Doom Patrol Volume 2, number 26, He provided a backstory that explained Morden's absence. The former Brotherhood of Evil teammates, the Brain and Mejo Mala, had promised to kill Morden if he ever appeared again, so he hid for many years in Paraguay. I'm not sure the right way to say that. Still longing to be a part of society again, he undergoes experiments by an ex-Nazi scientist that grant him the ability to drain the sanity from human beings. As a side effect, he himself is driven insane and forms the Brotherhood of Dada. After his transformation, Mr. Nobody looks like a two-dimensional artistic representation of a shadow and has an empty space on his chest in the shape of a heart. As for the name of his crew, the Brotherhood of Dada, well, that name is derived from the Dada art movement. The Dada movement consists of artists who rejected the logic, reason, and aestheticism of modern capitalist society, instead expressing nonsense, irrationality, and anti-bourgeois protest in their works. That sounds like Grant Morrison to me. If I was hard-pressed to give an answer, I'd say Mr. Nobody was Grant Morrison writing himself into the comics. Now, over the course of the series, Morrison dedicated some issues to parody and homage. Willoughby Kipling led the Doom Patrol on a parody of a story arc from Swamp Thing, A Murder of Crows, with Kipling being an unflattering version of John Constantine because DC wouldn't allow Morrison to use the actual John Constantine. And perhaps this was the first dry rub in the feud between Morrison and Alan Moore. Now, issue number 42 featured the origin of Flex Mentallo, who was supposed to be the character in the Charles Atlas ad, and a lawsuit from the Charles Atlas Company showed that DC was protected under fair use doctrine in addition to an expired statute of limitations. Now, I hope you guys took that in, because can you believe that Charles Atlas Company was still a thing in the 90s to even file a lawsuit? I was shocked by that. Another special, Doom Force, was released as a one-shot, was meant to mimic and parody the X-Force. And in issue number 45, Grant Morrison parodied Marvel's Punisher and Alan Moore in a satire called The Beard Hunter, a perpetually clean-shaven serial killer who murders bearded men. And this issue is probably the product of the feud rather than a cause of that Grant Morrison-Alan Moore feud. Now, it was Grant Morrison who revealed that the Chief was alive and had secretly caused all the accidents which turned Cliff, Larry Traynor, and Rita Farr into super beings. Chief stated that he caused them to gain their powers, or in the case of Robot Man, destroyed his original body in order to obtain his brain to put in a robot body because of his hatred for them. He felt they were spoiled and narcissistic as well as shallow individuals, and by turning them into freaks, he could improve them as human beings. When Morrison's run was complete, it was generally regarded as the best work in both the Doom Patrol and Grant Morrison's respective repertoires. Other writers like John Byrne, Keith Giffen, and Gerard Way would all take a turn at the helm of Doom Patrol, but none of them would ever get the ratio of psychosis and action quite the same as Morrison did. In light of that, it should come as no surprise that Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol stories are the basis for this live-action series that definitely would not be aired on ABC.
I'll tell you this. You know what's interesting is, like, during that whole thing where Bruce says, Grant Morrison came up with a character that's a sentient road. You didn't hear a word out of me and Sean. You know why? Because that's just Grant Morrison. You just go, that sounds about right.
Yep.
Willoughby Kipling's probably my favorite on there because at the time Doom Patrol was published by DC, Constantine Hellblazer was at the then nascent Vertigo, and they had this weird rule, like if a character's in Vertigo, they can't appear in DC. So he created Willoughby Kipling, which, well, is a parody character of note. If we ever get around to the latter part of the season, he does show up in the Doom Patrol. Maybe we'll get to talk about him next go-round.
First of all, I want to start this episode out and kind of tip my hat a little bit because over the last few weeks, it seems that Adam has been Mr. Grumpus. And I don't know why. Beats the heck out of me. So I went into this, and I'll be honest, I put it off until today because I was just like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this or not. The other stuff has just not really been hitting. The what you call it there, the Umbrella Academy, really just, I was pretty sour on that when everyone else seems to like it. I don't know why. But going into this, I was just like, oh boy, this is going to be a chore. And I got to say, we watched the first two episodes, spoilers for all the two episodes and everything, ahead of time, just for new listeners and everything. But I'll say this, I like this show. I'm shocked. I was shocked Like I said, like the first like half hour, I'm just like, oh my God, I really dig this. This is what I kind of wanted the other thing to be.
Yeah, I watched the first episode of this the same weekend that I watched the Umbrella Academy, and given sort of the linked nature of the two stories, this was definitely the one that was more for me. I mean, it really was striking to me the difference between the two shows.
And we do want to say this because Bruce mentioned it there, but keep in mind, this is not for your children, this show.
Unless your children are like 27, then what's
yeah. This don't have your like 8-year-old sit down, kids. We're gonna watch Doom Patrol, because in the first 2 minutes you're gonna be like, oh, where's the remote? Where's the remote?
It could be a cautionary tale. Like I can see ways that seeing Brendan Fraser's bare butt might set a kid on the right path in life instead of the wrong one.
I don't know. That's a 50-50 shot. Are you willing to take that risk?
And I'm glad to say that the last 15 years has been just as unkind to Brendan Fraser as they have to me.
Man, he needs to stop eating carbs.
I did not think we would ever actually see him. Like I was shocked when I watched the pilot that we get legit Brendan Fraser with a mullet in the pilot. I thought we were just strictly going to get voice out of him.
And I'll be honest, I can't believe this. I'm super happy that it's him.
Yeah,
I think it works really well.
Not only is he doing a great job, and he kind of brings what you need to bring to a character that he changed from being an IndyCar driver to a NASCAR driver, but also the fact that not only is he comfortable that he's camera ready, just being who he is, but he was ready to do a nude scene.
What's that? You need the pants to drop. Say, can I keep my shirt on? Okay,
There's
good.
also this weird thing with him where he's got this gravitas that not a whole lot of people have, right? So when you see him and when you hear his voice, immediately you're like, oh, right, that guy starred in a lot of movies that I watched when I was younger.
Gigantic in the 90s. Unbelievably huge, that guy.
Yeah. And I think I am firmly on the record, if you go back and listen to our previous shows, as being a strong Brendan Fraser fan, and this only makes it better for me.
Listen, in everything I've seen from the guy in like interviews, everybody says he's just the nicest dude. So like, you know, I mean, especially with like somebody who's had that career where he was literally just on top of the world. This was like, he was a starring actor, you know what I mean? And then
he was a better mummy than Tom Cruise.
And yeah, and then over like 10 years, like his career just kind of like fizzled into next to nothing. But him coming back in this, man, I'm just like, we are in a Brenda-sance. It's good. It's good stuff. And I was again shocked at how well it worked. And again, you're right. He is mostly voicing this, and I don't know if he's behind the mask. I feel like that can't be.
I don't think he's actually being.
He is not behind the mask.
Around.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine, because like, you know, well, he's still big enough to not have to wear a bloody thing on top of his head the whole flipping time.
It may come as a shock to you, but it's actually NBA Hall of Famer Charles Barkley in the mask.
Charles Barkley's more thick than that. You better believe that, boy.
It's CGI. They tried to de-age Charles Barkley and got Robot Man. They don't know where they went wrong, but they love it.
You remember how we got Steve Rogers in that first Captain America movie? We're going to do that, but with Charles Barkley inside this robot costume. Wouldn't it be cheaper to hire a thinner guy? Yo, Barkley just brings something special to the role.
Look, I require Barkley.
And right from the beginning, even if you don't know who Grant Morrison is and you're just checking out the show, you know that it's got a Morrison vibe to it with Alan Tudyk's narration. Right from the beginning, I mean, it's a self-aware meta narrator. He starts off
beyond aware of everything that's going on, and I love it.
And that's the kind of thing I've gotten kind of sick of in Grant Morrison's comics, but it works really well for me on this TV show.
And again,
we haven't seen a whole lot of that yet, have we?
Not really, especially not straight up from the narrator, which, you know, I always kind of had this theory in the comics when Mr. Nobody shows up and the way that he's just a little too weird and his powers don't make any sense and stuff, that was Grant Morrison drawing himself or writing himself into the comics. And I definitely feel that way with this narrator, that this narrator kind of gives you the idea that this is his story that he's telling, almost like he's making it up as he goes along kind of thing. I like it.
Me too.
And
I mean,
I
to
like
the
Alan
point,
Tudyk too.
Yeah, and to the point where, and again, we're jumping around a little bit here, but when he's on the bus with Timothy Dalton and straight up talk, like basically is talking to us, it's kind of unbelievable.
And like even at the beginning of the show, he goes, I know, you're rolling your eyes. Here's another superhero show that's starting as so many of them do with a Nazi. And then in episode 2, it starts off the same way. So for the 5 of you that are still here after the donkey farted in the first episode.
You're like, we can't believe you just watched this crap and you're going in for a second one. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, some comment. The critics are going to hate this anyway. What do I care?
He's talking about people trolling Reddit and talking about how like they bought DC accounts just to hate on it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
And you know, Alan Tudyk is also a guy. You know, we were talking about Brendan Fraser. And people say he's a nice guy. Alan Tudyk is like one of those guys I really liked. I liked Firefly. I liked his character in Firefly. Enjoyed him in A Knight's Tale and stuff. And then I got to kind of meet him briefly in Seattle at Emerald City Comic Con. And the guy was like awesome in person and could make fun of himself a little bit. And, you know, made fun of how his own looks have deteriorated since Firefly went off the air and stuff like that. And it's one of those things where you really like somebody, you meet him, and then you like him that much more.
Did you ever see that comic book thingy that he put out? That's like some show with like him and Fillion, I think.
I don't think I've seen that.
He put together something. I don't know if it ever got past like they just made like a pilot or something, but it was just basically like him and I think Fillion. Then they were like doing like, but it was narrative. But they were doing like a thing about convention, people that go to the conventions and all that. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
I don't know if that ever hit the light of day. It looked very interesting.
Sounds like something I would really get into too, because I'm kind of a convention guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, definitely. But I like him as the narrator and what he brings to the character of Mr. Nobody, and sort of I'm trying to think of the right way because it's beyond absurdist. I mean, just the way that they approach that character and surrealist, I think might be the term. Like, yeah. I know artistically there's a difference between Dadaism and surrealism, but this feels just very surreal in terms of the whole way that we're tackling Alan Tudyk's character and having him be the narrator. And oh, gee, I don't know if in the first 2 episodes we get it, but there's also a character introduced just for the show. I don't remember from the comics called Ezekiel the Cockroach that starts giving commentary too. And some really good stuff here, man. But
it is bananas crazy. And I'm very glad that it is.
And these first 2 episodes are sedate compared to like episodes 3, 4, and 5.
It's the kind of thing, unfortunately, I think, not to talk about is specifically about the show, but to talk about it as a general thing. The show's great. I really like the show. The problem with it is that it's not going to make people who are on the fence about buying DC Direct or DC Universe buy DC Universe.
It's just going to make the people maybe who already have it hang on to it a little bit longer.
Right.
And at first I wondered, all these other streaming services dump their shows all at once. Why is DC stringing them out a week at one show a week, making you hold on to it for a few months? But now I get it. Hopefully they're thinking you got it for Titans and you held on for 3 months there. And then Young Justice kept you going for a couple of months. And now this is going to keep you going. Like they're trying to make it so you don't do like what a lot of people I know would do when Game of Thrones would come out. You get HBO Go for a month and watch them all, and then or 2 months watch them all, and then you cancel it. They're trying to keep people from doing that, I think, and it's working for me, man. I keep finding stuff every month on there that's a gem in my perverse world of loving like
garbage.
Jackson Bostwick Shazam and stuff like that.
I cannot wait to see that.
But at the same time, too, what's kind of good about that, I think, is that it does get back. There's something to be said for the traditional television model of going week after week and developing a word of mouth, developing a thing to where, because like what do they got? 5 episodes out right now? More than that? Somewhere in that neighborhood?
5 out.
So like that's not that much to catch up on. And, hey, people listening to this show, you've got a chance to catch up and not have to worry about, oh gosh, I got to sit down and dedicate 14 hours of my week to this bloody thing. Nah, man, just get an hour here, an hour there, and you're going to be fine. I think there's something to be said about that that's kind of gone in that Netflix way. And while that's a good thing, it can also be considered a bad thing, I think.
And, about half of the episode is origin stories. and then it still has its own story. Because I thought this first episode would probably just all be origin story stuff, but it gets the action going by the end of it. But they take us back to see Cliff. Brendan Fraser is the NASCAR driver. A little bit of a change from the comics that I think was a right change. I don't know that as a NASCAR racer. And you guys may not be aware of this, but in some regions, NASCAR is very popular.
Some places I've heard.
Yeah. But I love seeing those old 1988 era NASCAR cars, man. They reconstructed them pretty good. It was a little bit of a flashback there.
I'll tell you this, the thing that kind of blew me away, because I know how much work this is that, in NASCAR and everything, there's just boatloads and boatloads of advertisements, because that's how, they make money, putting on cars and everything. And everything that's in here is all just made up stuff. So the amount of work that had to be put in to make all the logos and design and to put that all in a race thing and not have any of the original stuff in there, that's a boatload of work, man. And I was like, good on you, Flick. You really that's tough.
Yeah, did a good job. And I kind of like the humor of the moment. He's going around the racetrack. He's of course been stepping out on his wife with the nanny, and then he looks over at the pit as he passes his pit and sees his wife and his crew chief getting really publicly affectionate, and that's what causes him to crash. So there's a deep amount of humor in that moment, even though it gets undone later in the episode.
It's a little much. Like what a way to go. And I love how he's just like, how fast are you driving in NASCAR? At least 170 miles an hour. And you're going by, you catch that one that fast? What's going on? Is this a yellow flag? What's going on here? How are you eyeballing that quick?
I know that camera technology changes over the years, but maybe you can still help me with this since you did go to film school, Adam. But when they're giving us the Rita Farr flashback and she's making the movie in Africa with the fake crocodile and everything, and there's this guy that they say he's the best focus puller in Africa.
Yep.
What exactly is a focus puller?
Okay, so the cameraman that, you normally think of, he's just kind of like pointing the camera in the right direction, and, if it moves, he's moving it with it and everything. He can't do that and make sure everything is in focus at the same time. So it's a job that requires 3 arms. Technically, it could only require 1. Like this guy only has 1 arm, and frankly,
there's the cameraman with 2 arms, and he has 1, so it's a 3-arm job.
Yeah, it's a 3-arm job, and they only needed that 1 extra arm, and they're like, this cat's only got 1 arm. There's another arm not getting in the way. Let's get him on board. And apparently, he's the best focus puller in Africa, which I find hilarious. It's awesome. It's just like, no. He's the best.
The 1-arm guy. No, not that 1-arm guy. The other 1-arm guy.
He'd have a real problem in today's technology, because like a lot of focus pulling is done by remote, and you almost need 2 hands for that, because you got to hold the little remote dealy too. So
I use autofocus, so I'm cool.
Yeah, that's just set that professional camera to autofocus and you'll be fine.
I do it all on my iPhone.
Hey, that's how Steven Soderbergh does it.
2001 or whatever. But yeah, she's disgusted at this guy's the fact that he only has 1 arm. Which, let's be honest, of all the deformities you can encounter in the world, having 1 arm's not that bad.
No,
but I do feel bad the guy didn't get a hook or something.
I do enjoy the. We'll just put a jacket over. It's just real great, kind of like, come on, you don't really mean that. We'll just put a jacket. You won't even. I'll know it's there.
Now, I kind of got the implication that the set was sabotaged by friends of the 1-armed man to make her fall into the water, and that's why nobody came to her rescue.
Possibly, but at the same time, too, who knows the.
I saw it as like the Batman Begins thing with the, I won't kill you, but I also don't have to save you kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Oh, man, it would have been cool if Christian Bale was in the show.
She's been a turd to us all along. Let her drown. We don't give a crap.
And then she runs into some substance under the water that turns her into gravy, I guess, or like really thick. It's like almost like uncooked biscuit dough is what she turns into.
Yeah, I could see that, like a sloppy Stay Puft Marshmallow. Yeah.
And then Matt Bomer, man, I didn't realize he was in this till I watched the pilot, because I knew that Timothy Dalton and Brendan Fraser were in it, but. Matthew Bomer's another guy who I've run across a few times. I like those Magic Mike movies.
They're good films.
The most handsome man in the world.
And
he's not on our team.
We're gonna put him all. We're gonna wrap his head in gauze. It's like, guess what, handsome boy? No, bye.
Once again, I think they mainly got him for flashbacks and voice. I think
he's not underneath the.
I would not be. I'm not surprised.
But I really liked him. There was a movie, man. It's like the Unsomething Heart or whatever that has Mark Ruffalo and him in it as like a gay couple in the 80s in New York or something. It's a really good, like, made for HBO movie or something. And it was really good too. So I like this cat. So I was happy to see him as Larry Trainor. And then, Larry Trainor is the test pilot with The Secret, because it's the 1960s where being a test pilot for what I will assume is the Air Force. I don't know. Do they really say who he's a test pilot for? Kind of looks like the Air Force to me.
That's what I would imagine.
And he also, is a closeted gay man who has a wife and a child too. Maybe doesn't he have a child? But he also he has this affair with this grounds crew member who's always there when he's taken off. And I really kind of feel like, even though it doesn't make sense in the way the whole thing's set up, other than maybe it's a creation of his own psyche, but I almost kind of feel like they make us think it's the spirit of his I don't know if you call him jilted lover, that is that negative energy that's inside of him.
It feels like that definitely could be it, because like when he's up in the plane and everything, he's got like everybody, quote unquote, like everybody there, so to speak. And and like they're both kind of arguing at him and why he needs to, do what he needs to do.
And I like the way that he phrases it. I didn't become a monster. I always felt like a monster, because, that's the way he was made to feel for being gay in 1963 or whatever.
That was a really nice touch. Also, if this thing was written by Stan Lee, it wasn't written by Stan Lee, because if it was, there's no way that being that negative man becomes would not be related to him somehow.
Yeah. Now, I also wonder, I don't know how the creative process went for this show, but I wonder if they knew that they wanted, because Larry Trainor doesn't have this whole aspect, the aspect of being a closeted gay person in the comics that I'm aware of. And when you cast Matthew, is it Bomer?
I think it's Bomer.
Am I saying the name right? Yeah. Matthew Bomer, who, he's an openly gay actor. And then I kind of wonder, like, did they cast him like before they added that element and they thought, ooh, that might be an interesting element? Or did it just kind of work out serendipitously? I don't know, but it's like I know him best from movies. The characters I know him, he's playing gay characters too. So
because honestly, I didn't. I like before, not too awful long ago, I didn't realize I didn't know he was gay, just because I don't really follow too much of his work. Just whatever. But I'd also gone like, he does play a lot of gay characters, and I'm like, oh, he's gay. All right. I thought, well, he plays an awful lot of gay characters.
His character's gay in Magic Mike. I remember that. Then his character, of course, was gay in that movie with Mark Ruffalo. And then my wife, who, for better or worse, was a fan of the 50 Shades of Grey books. They talked about casting him as Christian Grey and all the housewives.
Gosh, what a better choice that would have been, because at least Bomber can act, man.
You have your closed-minded housewives who said they refused to accept a gay man as Christian Grey, which I think is pretty crummy,
Yeah, come on. He's way better looking than the other guy. He's a better actor. Come on, forget about it. Ladies, the bad move on your part.
If we can go back for a second here, Bruce, because you were asking about, you don't know how this went down. I do not know this for real. I don't know the actual circumstances behind this. But I would imagine that if they want to get Matt Bomer, one of the things that they probably did was they made the character gay to get him to do the show. Because if you want to get that guy on your show, that's probably not easy to grab a bunch of famous people for.
Yeah.
You make that character gay, and it becomes a lot more interesting to Matt Bomer to do it.
And it makes it a more interesting story, too.
That's what it felt like to me. It felt like it made the character a little bit more three-dimensional and gave it something that, if that wasn't there, I don't know that it would, pay off as well as it does.
It wouldn't have given it another flavor, because that's the thing with that character, right? Is that, Robot Man is vastly fascinating because he's got a human brain in his head. And then you have all these other characters who have so many quirks and so much personality that what are you exactly going to give Negative Man? And so to make him a gay guy, like, makes it 1,000 times more interesting of a character.
It also adds an extra dimension to that friendship with Rita Farr too, because she finds him as like an unthreatening gay friend, and obviously she kind of treats him like a pet more than a friend at times, but it adds an interesting dimension there. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys were with this actress playing Crazy Jane. I mean, I watched Orange is the New Black. I knew her as a minor, what I considered a relatively small character there. Never really thought much about her, to be honest. Like when she wasn't on the screen, I was thinking about something else. But she really comes in with the splash. Like, now I'm going to remember this actress, whether you like her performance or not. I mean, she comes onto the scene, and you can't help but take note of Crazy Jane.
I watched like the first 2 or 3 seasons of Orange is the New Black, and I kind of fell off because it just lost interest. But I wouldn't have,
because like everything that writer does, the first 2 seasons are great, and then it just goes down off a cliff after that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
But like I kept going. I'm like, this girl seems familiar. I'm not sure where she's from, but she's great. I like her a lot too.
She's great on the show.
Yeah, and she has I guess being cast as a superpowered person with 64 distinct personalities gives you a little bit more to do than being just another
you think
Latina inmate in prison. But I like her here, man. I like her.
I like the little digital effect that they do when when the personalities change and everything. I thought that's like
that
a nice little
wipe that they do.
Yeah, it's cool. It totally works, and it gives you something that, like, because I mean, let's be honest. We all can't be James McAvoy good. That's scary. You know what I'm saying? So, but this was like a nice little, like, just a visual delineation letting you know, hey, something else has changed. Something else has gone through. It's nice. It's subtle. It's not over the top or anything. Well handled.
Agreed.
Did you guys have like much knowledge or experience with Crazy Jane before the pilot?
0.
I did. I knew her, but that's because I've read the stories.
Yeah, and I never really liked. I mean, yeah, she has a decent arc. Actually, she has a really good arc in the comics, but I never liked her character design because I felt a little bit like he couldn't decide what to make the character, so he just made it so she could have whatever power was convenient for the story at that time or something.
Yeah.
Like there's a real part of the character concept that I didn't like. And because of that, even though she has a great arc in the comics, I never liked her as a character that much. And if they go in some of the same directions in the show as they did with the comic, I'm really going to find it interesting. But I love this live action version of the character way more than I ever bought into it in the comic.
Yeah, it works well for live action as well. Whereas for comics, it doesn't work nearly as well. I mean, not that it doesn't work well. It works fine. But it doesn't have that same, like punch that seeing it on television had.
And in the comics, they went with this romantic angle between her and Robot Man that I don't think they're going to do here, but who knows?
I hope not.
And then after this core group of people, once Crazy Jane shows up, and Crazy Jane's introduction in the comic is her painting a portrait in the rain. Like the first time we meet Crazy Jane in the comics, that's what she's doing. So I like that nice homage. I mean, there's some pretty strong direct scenes lifted from the comics here, which I like, but they're still giving it their own story.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that Doom Force episode happen.
I hope they do a Beard Hunter. You don't know how bad I hope they do a Beard Hunter episode. But
when you were talking about that at the beginning of the show, Bruce, I it's so funny because that is literally how I got introduced to Doom Patrol. Is that my buddy was like, hey, there's a comic book out making fun of X-Men right now. It's called Doom Force. And I was like, oh, is it a regular series? And he goes, well, it's Doom Patrol, but they're making fun of just how terrible X-Men has gotten. It's the 90s.
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, oh, this is funny. And then because of that, I went backwards and I read all of that stuff. And it was just because of the parody that got me into Doom Patrol in the first place.
And I love it that Marvel's response was to eventually hire Grant Morrison to get X-Men on track.
Yeah.
We also have that worked.
I know that those are really derided issues and not everyone loves what he did. I think what he did was great.
There's elements in there that are really good.
Oh, there are people that love those issues. You know, I mean, it's a matter of taste. Some people really like Morrison, but it's like cilantro. You know, there's some people, no matter what, it's just not their thing. You know, they're not going to like it.
To me.
It's more of the it's more of the Frank Quietly art, in my opinion. For that reason.
Well, I like Frank Quietly, so I'm the outlier with most humans.
But you love people with weird puckered lips.
Yeah, that's how I try to look all the time.
Me too.
But once the team gets together, and then Niles, just for unknown reasons, says he has to go off and do something, and makes the terrible, terrible decision to leave these people unsupervised in his mansion, and that's when they decide to go into town and have a drink because Crazy Jane has a bus, like a school bus that's painted black and somehow belongs to Larry Trainer.
Hold on, man. The bus is where he keeps where Negative Man keeps his plants.
Yeah, he's they show him watering stuff a whole bunch.
So she just got it up and running.
Yes.
And painted it black.
With spray paint. If you look close enough, it looks like someone spray painted.
It's just horrible matte black looking, just kind of
And I make the weirdest comparisons. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say last week when I was talking about Nick Fury and his eye and comparing it to Hot Tub Time Machine, I listened to a very popular podcast that came out a day later than ours who made that same comparison. So I think people are paying attention to the weird stuff I say. But in this,
God help us all.
Just you.
Now in this though, when the crew goes to town to have a drink, it kind of feels like in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure when they take the historical people to the mall. Like it's going okay at first. Everybody's kind of finding something that makes them more comfortable than you'd expect, and then it goes off the rails. And Genghis Khan gets an aluminum bat and starts destroying mannequins.
I just we do also live in a weird world where like people would kind of go like, oh, what was that? But like a big metal dude shows up. There's not enough commotion in my opinion.
I totally disagree, man. In this day and age with so much cosplay and everything else,
I guess that's essentially what I'm saying.
People will look at him, but people will look at him for 30 seconds and then move on.
Oh, another jerkwad trying to get attention.
In the real world, if I was confronted with Robot Man, I would say, so he had the technology to put your brain into a machine, but he decided that the way to make that machine was with rivets and pig iron. Like, has he not heard of composites? Robot Man could look pretty good. He could be in some Uncanny Valley territory if they really tried.
Here's the thing. If Alita would have looked like that movie would have made sense. Because she looked way too good, and all those other people are in there with a crappy forklift arm going, what gives?
So that was one of the questions that I had for you guys. This TV show takes place in the 90s, correct?
I don't think so.
No,
we're in the
2000s.
You know why I'm asking you this?
Okay.
Is because are they trying to fit the Cyborg timeline into the movie as well?
No, not even close.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to wait just a second to talk a little bit about Cyborg, but one thing we know is it's 1995 when Cliff first regains consciousness.
Right.
And then he can't move or anything. He's on a dolly. Then some time goes by, and he's like, by the time Crazy Jane shows up, he's like playing with his race cars and stuff. So some time has passed. Like if you told me this was in the 2000s, I would believe it.
No,
I don't think it's in the 90s.
They have years that are up there. They get into the 2000s for sure. But I'll say this: I really did like a really neat, different idea on the traditional kind of train set sort of thing, having the slot cars, and that I thought that was a really cool touch. I was just like, I've never really seen anything like that before, and I thought that was just artistically really interesting.
And I like the idea that they mentioned he found Crazy Jane in an asylum in the 70s. And when he brings her in, I mean, she's still clearly not yet 30.
That's the question I've got that hopefully this show will somehow answer in some way, shape, or form.
Well,
I understand how Cliff isn't aging, but the rest I'm like,
Having seen more episodes than you, they only make it more confusing about why does Crazy Jane look like she does.
Sometimes I don't care as long as you make it interesting. Superpowers. Shut up.
Yeah, and they go to town, and then things start to go to crap when all of a sudden people are is it a school bus full of children confronted by the slowest moving menace in history as Elastigirl is slowly oozing toward them, and Cliff solves it by going out and picking up a big piece of asphalt, which I wish had been Danny the Street.
All of a sudden, the street just goes, hey, watch your hands there, boy.
And I couldn't help
the
it.
street is coming.
And I can't help but think, as slow moving as that threat was, there could have been way more cost-effective ways than ripping up the pavement. But anyway, the show is the show. But that causes Niles. That causes Niles to get upset because he didn't want attention drawn to where he was because he's scared to death of Mr. Nobody, who of course shows up and attacks the team. You know, he opens this weird vortex to who knows where, and the team, he sends out to the front lines a donkey that farts a cloud of green gas that says the mind is the limit. And that's kind of where our first episode ends, right?
Right.
What a way to end an episode.
And that's the thing. Like you see the cheering cockroach before that, and it's bananas crazy. And when you see that, yeah, at least I did while watching it, I was like, "What? That's about it. That's probably the line. Like that's as crazy as the show gets."
Now,
and then the donkey farts and it says something, and it's like, "Oh no, I was wrong about that. This is the craziest this show's gonna get."
Now, do you understand why the cockroach is cheering?
I don't get it.
Okay, because the cockroach is convinced that the sooner humanity is killed off, the sooner cockroaches rule the world.
Oh, I like that.
That's Ezekiel the cockroach. Anytime the Doom Patrol are in peril, Ezekiel is going to be cheering against the Doom Patrol.
Yes.
That's great.
And the vortex, Mr. Nobody, played by Alan Tudyk, with this really cool special effect where like parts of his body
looks so great.
That's neat.
Totally different from the comics, but you can't really do what they did in the comics in live action.
It just looks so cool and unique, and it seems like the kind of thing where if the show is ever going to be successful, which it is not, there's no way the show is ever going to be that successful, that this idea will be taken elsewhere.
I'll say this though, man, oh man, because I don't know what the budget of this thing is, but it is like this show's not cheap, and you can tell, like, because you know what cheap TV shows look like, because there's always like enough little things that like you can see where they kind of skimped. None of this feels like they skimped at all. It is really kind of top notch on
episode
stuff.
Looks, yeah.
Though I will say this: the one small complaint that I've got CGI fire still looks like crap, guys. It still does.
That's why I say you've got to use actual hot lava in these scenes, but they won't return my calls. Molten lead works too. But this is that scene when Mr. Nobody.
According to my daughter, my entire living room floor is made of hot lava. They can come and get that if they want to.
Now, this scene on the bus too, where Alan Tudyk's Mr. Nobody's confronting Niles, is part that you alluded to earlier, Adam, where Alan Tudyk begins speaking directly to the audience, and then Niles responds to that, like, "Who are you talking to? You're not in control of this story," which is kind of cool too, because we see Niles as the person who doesn't think that this sort of breaking the fourth wall storytelling is working. Then they all go off into the vortex. Crazy Jane jumps after them in the vortex, and I love the way that it looks like they're sucked up into the sky, but they're actually sucked down into the ground, kind of warping perception there a little bit. That was all good.
There's a lot of really nice touches on the show. They do things they don't have to do, and they do it.
Like go down a donkey's throat.
And after they firmly established what I think I'm getting into with this show, episode 2, they give us Cyborg, who I'd kind of blocked out that Cyborg was going to be part of this team because I was so happy with the team they already had. And Cyborg so clearly doesn't fit in this world. And they make it work by having him as a character who really doesn't fit in this world.
Right.
First of all,
I've got to tell you something about this character. I've never been on the Cyborg bandwagon. I never liked this character ever. Even when he came out with when he was on the Superpowered show in the 80s. I was never a fan of his. However, the way they're portraying him on this show, I like this version of who this character is.
It works, right? I mean, like in the first 5 seconds, he's got more charisma than the cat that they had in the movie.
A doubt.
Like, because he was so boring and nothing. This kid's got personality. I like him a lot. He totally works.
And they make a pretty bold move because also Cyborg's official story is he was on his way to be a college football hero when his accident happened, and they cast a person who we probably don't expect to be cast as a football hero in most shows or movies, right? I mean, he's kind of diminutive compared to what a lot of other versions of Cyborg have been.
Maybe a little running back or something, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right, though. He's got personality, which was the way to cast it. And as good as all the effects are great on Mr. Nobody. The effects are great when Crazy Jane does stuff like speaks words and they turn into metal blades and she throws them. I mean, all these great effects, and I think they intentionally lo-fi the Cyborg effects just a little bit.
I hope so. I hope that's what that is.
I think it looks fine. I mean, like everything about, again, it's just like one of those things that, like, when you see it, you're like, Cyborg, this, like, we don't have a good track record for Cyborg. And like 10 seconds in, you know it's going to work.
He
found
a way
way
to make
better.
it work.
In my opinion, he looks way better than what they had in Justice League.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Clearly leaning on prosthetics instead of CGI for most of his appearance. I mean,
that's fine.
Yeah, it gives it a throwback feel that fits with the Doom Patrol, which are, clearly a product of the 60s and 80s, maybe early 90s in the comics. But I didn't know how Cyborg was going to fit in. I didn't know if I was going to, like, enjoy it once he showed up or if I felt like he was going to interrupt the dynamic. It's like when they brought Charlie Sheen on Spin City. I didn't like that. But I like Cyborg coming here on Doom Patrol.
That's an excellent point. Charlie Sheen on Spin City kills Spin City. And, Michael J. Fox is a treasure. He is an American treasure. And then you bring in that dirtbag Charlie Sheen to take his spot. No, thank you.
Boo.
And then they go on.
Oh, by the way, real quick, Phil Morris, his dad, that guy is amazing. He's awesome at everything that he's in. He's just like one of those just great character actors.
What else has that guy done?
Black Dynamite. He was in Star Trek 3.
Right.
He does like a lot of voiceover work and stuff, but he's one of those dudes. He does a good bit of television and stuff as well. Gosh, I remember back. What was he in the 90s that I remember? But like, he's just one of those dudes that just shows up and he's just like constantly just on top.
All I do is make the show better by existing.
Tons of video games and things like that. But awesome dude.
And then the second episode is really once again, I'm going to use the word surrealistic because it's just a surrealistic journey where they squish, they take a garbage bag and make a human icing squeezer.
God, I love it.
They squeeze Rita into the donkey. Then they all end up going down into the donkey. They have this bizarre adventure where they're shown like their worst memories kind of thing and forced to face some realities. Then they come out of the donkey, and I don't feel like, other than learning a little bit about themselves, I don't think they accomplished anything by that journey in the donkey, but it was still a pretty interesting episode because we, the viewer, learned a little bit more about the characters.
And we got to go inside of a donkey.
Yeah. That poor donkey, man. Do you think he really had to swallow those actors?
I do. I think that he's a pro, though, so he didn't make a big fuss about it.
He just does what he's got to do.
Camera equipment and everything.
Bring it on the inside here. Okay, so we're rounding about an hour here, and I will say this. We're not going to give a full review for this because, boys, I'm going to tell you something. I want to watch the rest of this show. I can't believe it.
Me too.
I came into this very apprehensive on this, but I've come out the other end going, this is a show that I would continue to watch, and I want to do it once we hit 13 episodes? That's my guess.
Yeah, because I want to
15 episodes.
15. Okay, a couple more than usual.
I want to reconvene when I can talk about Willoughby Rippling. I'm sorry. Kipling. I'll get it right sooner or later. But I want to reconvene when we can talk about that character. I want to reconvene when we can talk about a certain puppet show we'll get to see in the future. I mean, there's so much more good stuff to talk about. Yeah. Stuff that's a direct storyline from the comics that is separate from the main storyline. Like they go on a mini arc within the arc. It's great. It really is great. I can't wait till we talk more.
So we're gonna, do that not too awful long here. So let's just do this. Let's give a quick round of what we like about these two episodes so far. And I know you know a little bit, Bruce, but you don't know everything because they're not all out yet. And
right.
What you expect to see more in the future. We'll start with you.
Okay, so the biggest point of reference for me is comparing this show to Umbrella Academy, and knowing the comics, the origin comics from both, is why I'm going to end up comparing these shows, whether that's fair or not. And this one cranks the weirdness way up. And it cranks up the weirdness. Some of it is weird for weirdness' sake, but it's told in such a way I find it enjoyable. I like the casting. I like that there's always something going on. There aren't really any slow moments in these first two episodes. it keeps you puzzled, curious, wondering what the heck's going to happen next. So it definitely, the first 2 episodes had me signing up to watch, the whole season.
Sean?
For me, I like the show. I think one of the things that I really like about it is that it feels small but not cheap. And, they know, the people making the show know what they're doing. There's not some world level threat here yet. I'm sure it's going to come to that. But with these first episodes, I mean, when you really think about it, the day is saved when the pilot episode by tearing up a street. Like, that's pretty good. And and I do like that juxtaposition because they have a lot that they have to do writing wise so that who all these characters are. They give you enough time with them that you like them and care for them. And I think that they've done a pretty good job with that, at least in these first 2 episodes. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this.
Yeah, like I said, I can't believe how well this is put together, and something that I don't want to say dreading, but I was just like, another one of these streaming shows we got to do. Let's see how good it was. And to me, this is how you do it. This is how you do, it had everything in this show that Umbrella Academy didn't have that I wanted, which was just really like a solid origin story, characters I cared about, and I don't know, it just seems to work, and it is a nice irreverent kind of it plays with the themes and stuff that we do on this show all the time, and kind of looks at those and turns them on their head a little bit, and I like that.
And I felt like, once again, making that comparison, I felt like Umbrella Academy was an attempt to make something that as many people as possible would enjoy. And I felt like this is an attempt to make something that a very few people would absolutely adore. They just have that different feeling. Not, Umbrella Academy's well made and it appeals to a lot of people, but the fewer number of people who love this are really going to be into this because there's not really anything else like this out there.
This feels like one of those things where it's not going to last very long. But it's going to be one of those shows where people are going to talk about it for years and years to come.
And is it fair to say, at least for you guys, that you think in the Grant Morrison adaptations that this is doing better for you than Happy?
Oh, I don't know. Those are they're very different, and I'm sure I know the answer for Sean, but I'll be watching Happy season 2 when it comes out. We may not be talking about it in the show, but I'll certainly shoot and watch it.
I think I like this kind of weirdness a little bit better than the weirdness in Happy.
Well, it's a little less depressing. I'll tell you that. You're not wrong there.
Yeah.
This isn't just wading in the horribleness of one's life and making it super dirty and disgusting. But it does in a different way. But I will say this, for anyone out here who's been kind of on the fence and don't really know, give it a shot, dude. Because I think if you watch these first 2 episodes, I think you're going to be engaged enough to kind of go, I want to finish this out. I want to see what they're doing because it feels nice and kind of new and interesting. And you don't really get that a lot. Because like I said, we started this show out going, are we going to be able to fill up the year with, comic book stuff, and now we've got more than we can possibly handle, and a lot of it starts looking the same, and this feels just very different from anything else that we've kind of gotten as of late, and I dig it. So I would say check out Doom Patrol. It's on streaming right now. Now, what are we doing next week? That's right. Speaking of Patreon people, the people that support us over at patreon.com/HMP at any level get to vote on the movies we watch, and man, I don't remember if you guys remember what we put together for this next vote, but I'm going to tell you now, and you're going to be like, what were we thinking? Because I don't know. There may have been a slow gas leak somewhere because these are I'll tell you. Super Baby Geniuses. That's on the list.
I remember this now.
Yeah, now you remember it and go, oh my gosh, we made a horrible, horrible decision. The next one, Super Buddies. That's right. Mm-hmm. Something called Zoom. What was that again? I forgot.
That's the Tim Allen movie.
The Tim Allen movie that was a ripoff of Sky High. And Surrogates. Good old-fashioned Surrogates holding in at the number 4 spot, as it will do until you people bloody pick Surrogates. It's going to be there in that spot.
Never pick it. I always have it on the list.
So,
Bruce Willis at his best.
The perennial all-star that is Sarah gets rounds out that. And, of course, you can vote on that by heading down to patreon.com/HMP and supporting the show at any level. And when you do, you can get more perks and other good stuff like that. Go check it out, patreon.com/HMP. Bruce, in the meantime, where can we find more of your work on the internet, sir?
You can always go to Chubby Wizard on your podcasting device of choice, or go to chubbywizard.com. You can hear a nice long talk about Captain Marvel, Chubby Wizard style, when Chris came down from Canada, visited me in my home, and we actually got to record that one face to face. And if you're looking for something to read this spring, as spring is well known for book reading, go check out Nerdspawn Genesis, available on Amazon as a paperback or as an ebook, free to read on Kindle Unlimited. Nerdspawn, all one word, Genesis.
Sean?
You can find me every week on the Hero Movie Podcast doing the Stallone Connection.
Oh, my Lord. How in the world did we get here and not... Woo. The show was
getting ready to do 80 minutes of 80s, too.
I think the show was going a little long, and I think that's where my brain was just like, wrap it up. What a jackass. We have to ask ourselves, well, it's the most important part. How does this show relate to Sylvester Stallone? Oh, my goodness.
Thank you, Adam.
Ashamed of myself.
Statement. J.R. Campbell is a camera operator, and like every other dude or lady in the camera department, when you look for his picture, it is of himself with a camera. Camera people always have a picture of themselves with a camera.
Indeed.
The only thing that changes is sometimes they'll be standing next to their expensive car. Sometimes camera guy or gal will have a picture of themselves holding a camera, standing next to their dog. Sometimes they're holding their camera while standing next to famous people. My point is, camera people always have their photograph taken with their camera, because camera folks have absolutely no other interest than interest in cameras. It's kind of like my brother, Charles Drake Koufax IV. He just bought a lot of land in Montana, and now whenever he gets his picture taken, he's always wearing a cowboy hat because he likes to call the land he owns a farm, even though he doesn't actually do any farming on it. You have a garden, Charles. That's not a farm. We get it. You're proud of your place in Montana. But let's not forget, you grew up in Orlando just like me, Charles. You're as much a rugged cowboy as the Indian guy who plays the cab driver in Deadpool. And Charles, if you're listening to this, Mom and Dad are constantly talking about how well you've done for yourself, and that's probably why I hate the whole cowboy hat thing. But let's be honest with ourselves. You're never going to listen to this, Charles, because every time I tell you about the show, you always say superhero movies and TV shows are for children or for people who refuse to take responsibility for their own actions and wish they could be saved by people who do. So you're not about to start listening now. Now, Charles is the son my parents always wanted, whereas I'm the son my parents tolerate, like a small dry cough or light foot pain. Charles went to school to be a lawyer while I went to school for business administration, and no parent brags that their kid is in college for business administration. It's like bragging about how often your kid got a certificate from McGruff the crime dog. It just doesn't happen. And that's why I think my brother Charles will get along great with the camera operator J.R. Campbell, because Charles could talk to him about his farm in Montana, and J.R. could talk to my brother about how he worked on Creed, which stars Sylvester Stallone. Oh, Sly is the best, J.R. would say to my brother. He took us all out for expensive dinners, and we drove go-karts, and we ate cake, and it was the best time of my life. And I can show you because I have pictures of it, because I always have my camera on me. And there you have it. This week's Stallone Connection is J.R. Campbell. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm Sean Koufax. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Oh, my gosh. I can't believe we almost missed that. What a jackass I am, boy.
Wow.
I will say this, though. I am going to relinquish my bits this week and give a shout-out to some friends of mine who've actually started their own podcast. They're about 7 episodes in right now. And if you like horror films and learning about, all kinds of stuff about them and whatnot, I got a couple of friends that are doing a show called All American Spook Show Podcast. These are guys that I worked with back in news, forever and a day ago now. Really awesome guys. They're just getting their legs under them and everything, but they're doing a good job. So check them out, All American Spook Show Podcast. Check that out today. It's in all the places that you find the podcast and stuff. All right. So that is it, everybody. Thankfully, we got that Stallone connection out. I know there were some people probably screaming at their thing going, no, dear God, no, you got it. But we did.
You know what the worst part was? Even when Sean said, normally I do the Stallone connection on Hero Movie Podcast, it still didn't click to me why he was saying that. I'm really brain dead.
I'm at least glad that I put it together, and I was just like, what's he talking about? Oh, wait a second.
Yeah, I thought the joke was he's promoting the show he's already on, and I realized, I'm glad Adam paid attention.
It would have been better if he had just done it and be like, hey, you know the thing I just did? I do that all the time on this show. So right on about that one, boys. So that's it, everybody. Next week, we'll be talking about whatever our good folks over at patreon.com/HMP have to say. Until then, for Sean Koufax, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.